on-prem, but we are hybrid. Now the idea of an hybrid type of protection is, as you can see here, we have Arbo Cloud. So the idea is we ensure that you're protected on cloud for network protection to an agreed capacity. And I talked about aggregate capacity. Please stop me if this is. We talked about an aggregate capacity. Say, let's use 1 gig for the sake of the discussion. We have 1 gig protection here. But we all know that some of these attacks can go bigger. Sometimes could go, we've seen 2 terabytes. I've seen here in Nigeria, my major service provider, a couple of months ago, there was an attack of up to 200 gig. Now, if you as an enterprise, but rest assured, before that attack would come to you, it would have to go through the service provider. So the service provider would have to sort of, and then depending on the type of IP addressing you have, it may or may not reach you. But the impact would be felt because most of them are still operating as your last mile, So to get back to my example, if you have a 1 gig protection here at the AED, and then a 1 gig attack comes through your network, or let's say an attack that's higher than 1 gig, let's use 2 gig for the sake of the discussion, comes through your network, and you only have 1 gig protection here. So what happens? At the AED, you would have set a threshold that would say that at 60% of utilization of my capacity, signal the cloud. So the cloud, so Arbo Cloud, so as we call it cloud signaling, so that's the option, provides communication between my mitigation solutions. So there's mitigation capacity on the cloud of up to 14 TB to take off that excess capacity or that excess capacity on the attack from your on-prem system, and then obviously free up your bandwidth. Because at the end of the day, the idea is that we do not want to choke your bandwidth. So we want to make sure that you always have at least 50% of your available bandwidth usable. Difference between availability and usability and that kind of stuff. So that's where we call ourselves hybrid. Not all attacks are volumetric, and we'll see that as we go through a few use cases. Any questions so far? Yes, sir.
So with the information you've shared so far, it would appear that the best use case for the Netscout DDoS solution is more centered around an ISP, right? Can you paint for us a typical use case for an organization that obviously has the ISP as its last mile and wants to also make use of this solution to protect its internet connection?
There's both an ISP, so this is an ISP, and there's both an enterprise. So that's an organization you refer to. So we do have solutions that are dedicated for service providers, but the AED that I just talked about is for enterprise. It's called the Arbo Edge Defense, as you can see here. So I'm not sure if I'm responding to your question, but this is for a typical bank, a typical insurance company, a typical enterprise that's not a service provider. The service provider, the setup is totally different. At the risk of getting too technical, at the service provider level, we don't actually position our solution inline. You can't do that because obviously there's so much traffic there. You would impact all kinds of things. So we are out of band. You have to use BGP and that kind of stuff. I don't really want to get into that. So here, because we are dealing with capacities that are usually between 0 and 40 gig. In our box, actually, out of the box, we support that much, up to 40 gig. For the enterprise, I think that's a lot. I think a few enterprises can actually claim to have internet capacities higher than, I'd say, 5 gig. You'd get 10 gig at the big ones in the US. I've seen a few of them, but I'd say in our part of the world, I would say 5 gig seems fair. So the AED would sit inline in this case, inline of the traffic, and we're transparent. We don't have any IP address. We don't have any injection. We don't impact the traffic. All we do is we monitor it as the traffic comes through, and then because we are signature based, we basically have our own threat intelligence. I don't really like to have to say it, but he said we are the guardians of the connected world. I think it essentially means that we see a lot of the things that happen on the internet, good and bad. And now, of course, we feed that into our threat feed, or what some people would call IOC, indicators of compromise. So, and that is fed into the AED. So as the traffic comes into your network, we simply query our database, and the database is able to sort of stop the traffic. That's on the inbound side. But also on the outbound side, I use that as a use case. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But that's essentially how we go about protecting enterprises. Yeah. So I'm just going to dive deep into the AED. Yes, sir.
Yes, so when you say you see everything.
We see, yeah.
Yes. So from a security point of view.
From a security point of view.
So seeing everything, how much do you actually see?
Everything.
Everything.
And obviously I gave a stat here. The last I checked was about 70% of the internet traffic goes through our appliances. So that sort of gives us the sort of visibility that no one else has. So when I talk about visibility,
Information security.
from the point of
Information security.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going from the point of view of information security, PCI DSS, compliance, and you see everything.
No, we're not there. No, what I mean is traffic. The internet is really just a bunch of networks that are interconnected. So obviously, if I need to make a request to say Amazon or to Google, that would pass through a bunch of equipment. As the traffic passes through, we see this because we're connected to Amazon, we're connected to Google, we're connected to Cisco.
So you don't have access to data.
We don't open the data to look into it. We scan the data to sort of look into vectors. Where secure means what?
That you can't see their data.
We can't see the data.
Yeah, how do I tell a client that doesn't understand the
Because-
language?
How do you tell a
explain that to a client, for instance?
So how do you explain to a client that as the traffic goes through your Fortinet or your Palo Alto firewall, the traffic is not seen? It's pretty much the same thing. These devices were not made with looking into the traffic in mind. They were looking into finding IOCs. And that's why I talked about the threat intelligence. So that is basically where, and obviously they would be, as the traffic goes through our appliance, there are indicators within that traffic. Once we pick up these indicators, we stop the traffic. We stop the specific element that is compromised within the traffic. We do not look into the payload to sort of see this is card-bearing data or that kind of stuff. No, we don't.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just, because I deal with clients,
Yeah.
and sometimes I understand what you're saying, but is it?
That's what happens.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think there was a question on the back. This will be traditional. So as the traffic comes in, we filter the data, we look into it, and then we block attacks and that kind of stuff. But we also know that in most infrastructures, we have network firewalls, we have web application firewalls, we have all kinds of devices that make up our security stack. And we know that from a previous life, I know that whenever, as engineers, would configure firewalls, we would trust that any traffic that leaves our network is safe. So we'll create a rule that says any traffic that leaves my network, allow or sort of, I don't want to say it's bad, I think it's normal, because I don't think we don't care, it's just leaving, But there's a risk there as well, because we might have internally compromised hosts. And some of these hosts may want to establish connection with CNCs and that kind of stuff. And because we know again, the visibility that I talked about, because we know what's out there, so whenever that happens within your network, someone is trying to reach out to a compromised host on the internet,